All right. Hey everyone. Hi, Sasha. Welcome to
Morning.
episode 3 of Now Next Later. How are you?
Happy Monday. I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we're back at it. Feel like after July 4th, there was a little bit of like miscellaneous vacation and catching up. And now it's this week, and it's sort of like, okay, I can get this done before everyone leaves in August, probably. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where a bunch of my clients are. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I feel like people are more and more taking on the European vacation style where like all of Europe just takes the month of August off, which I'm very jealous of. I would like to do that myself, but have not yet.
I always joke we're 250 years behind them. So whatever they are ahead on, we figure
Yeah.
it out like 200 years later. So
Well, I hope we're on
we
year 249 of that one because I'd really
that's
like to
what
speed
I'm
that one
saying.
up.
Yeah, let's get to the European style vacations are definitely in our future, I would hope. But that'll be we'll have that for a fun topic in August on Now Next Later. We can talk about vacation schedules. This week we wanted to talk about data management. We had a great conversation last week about how do you think about your technology management and the now, next, later approach to thinking through why do I do what I do when I add a vendor, or why do I do what I do when I pick software. I think after our episode, then there was a couple of announcements about the 2023 HMDA data going public. Data management is always a concern in our industry because everybody hears what everybody else is doing and thinks it's way more sophisticated and way more interesting than what they're doing. And so data analytics is a huge part of the competitive landscape. So we figured this week, you and I, we could talk a little bit about data management in our businesses and in our clients, and see hopefully how we can apply the now next later approach to data management. I don't know, just kind of to level set, I tried to sketch out a couple of areas of businesses where data lives today. So
Mhm.
Sasha, if it's okay, I want to throw these at you and see what did I miss, and what are other areas where it either slips through the crack or you've seen, people struggle.
Sure.
Obviously, there's been an entire um, focus on CRMs over the last 10 years. CRMs
Yeah.
that are standalone, CRMs that benefit the LO versus the consumer, CRMs that are holistic. There's a lot of CRMs out there that try to ingest servicing data, which is another category we'll get to in a second. But right off the bat, it's sort of like that front edge relationship management system with the data in it. Whether or not they become a applicant or a customer, you've got them in the system. The next one I had, and I put POS and LOS in the same category. And the reason why was so very little lives in your POS other
Mhm.
than perhaps like, did we hit the goal? Did somebody
Yeah.
sit in there too long? Or how long did it take them to get from POS to some other system? And so I kind of put them together because that's really the analytics BI level. I don't think you're using in process consumer data um, to make sort of sales conversion decisions. I think you're using it to do like workflow. Did we hit our goals? How many people are stuck in which bucket,
Yep.
milestone? And then, so we have CRM, we have POS, LS. I put like HMDA and regulatory as a bucket. So there are fees, there's state reporting, NMLS, there's HMDA. Most people consider this to be a cost area and not necessarily a data rich area, but I think you and I want to talk about that today. And then
Yeah.
the fourth, servicing. You've got your servicing data and where it lives and what is it. So I had four categories at a high level for just the now portion. What did I miss, and how do you look at it when you think of like helping clients manage
Yeah.
data?
I think those four are reasonable high level. There's always internal data that folks are going to look at and leverage that could probably be bifurcated from those four. I also like the compliance HMDA reporting. I mean, it is heavily reliant on what you put in the application and ultimately what ends up in your LOS. I mean, that's your LOS is your source of truth. So there's a lot of crossover there too. Um, and I think one of the things that I see a lot of clients struggle with is, do they actually have a central repository where they keep all the data? And then what are they doing with that data later on? So there's more like what do I do right now with my data to manage my day-to-day business, close loans, service loans, sell loans, versus if I have all this data sitting somewhere, should I go back and leverage it for insights, like layer on BI analytics? And I think the two are a little bit different. And I've seen clients mostly ignore the latter, to be honest. And a lot of them are now going like, oh, we have all this like data that shows us trending, and maybe we should go back and look at it, or we don't really have proper pipeline reporting in. And as a result, we're struggling with, if we portfolio loans, like making sure that we're keeping enough cash on hand. And so I think there's a lot of richness to data that doesn't get used on the back end to help get smarter on the front end. And I see a lot of clients really looking at now, okay, how can I, especially in a down cycle, right? It's slower, you have an opportunity to take advantage of that time. How do I look at the data I already have and get smarter about how I use it on the front end?
Yeah, I think that central repository and how you use it. So I was at Rocket, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage, when there was an evolution from data warehouse to data lake. And I
Yeah,
think data lake became a function of how fast cloud computing evolved, and cloud
yep,
computing got so big so fast. You had data pouring in, probably from systems that were, you could, let me put it this way, you could extract data from even older systems and get it into a central place.
yeah.
And that speed, particularly around cloud, really developed a lot of data quickly for large enterprises, especially large IMBs. Do you have a sense with like mid-size or smaller IMBs? I don't really know about, community banks, whether cloud computing has reached sort of down into those functions and helped IMBs kind of organize this data, or are they still working data out of instances, data out of like the LOS literally, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing?
I wish I could speak more broadly across like a good sample size of that. I only have a handful to think of, but the handful that I'm thinking of that I've spoken with about this, they're more the latter, right? They're still
Yeah,
looking at
yeah.
that data out of the systems. And what's interesting is I find it fascinating. I'll get a little controversial, which I know is your favorite thing to do. Uh, there are systems that are so, and I mean, almost all the systems are antiquated in those bigger areas that you mentioned, unless they're very new technologies in the last 5 to 10 years. But like some of the systems are so antiquated that the way that they function is so limited in how you can capture data and report it. Some core banking systems and even the LOS that they layer on top have open data field for the vast majority of what they're gathering. And how do you pull a report when you're depending on a loan officer, a processor, or a closer, whoever, to like literally just dump a bunch of data into one big open field of text? And it doesn't surprise me, because mortgage never seems to surprise me with being antiquated, as much as I would love for us to get more avant-garde. But it also does surprise me, because I'm like, really? Like, how do you run your institution off of that? Like, that's tough.
Yeah, you're really relying. I mean, I was talking to a lender recently, and a new leader came in, looked kind of at the old process, and the existing process was largely trusting the leader of that area. So the
Yeah.
person who either ran the organization, CEO level, or sort of production leader, C-suite level, was literally just looking to that business leader. That business leader did what they did. Maybe it was a spreadsheet, maybe they had someone else on their team providing them reporting, and they took it to like the big meeting. And it
Yeah.
was largely leader dependent. That the quality of that data, the consistency of that data was leader dependent. And I think what we're saying is downtime, slower market. We don't know what's about to happen in September through May of next year. So at a minimum, we're saying don't be that anymore. Don't be leader dependent. If you can get out of being leader dependent and being into system dependent, even if it's somewhat mediocre reporting directly out of your LOS or something, get there.
Yeah.
And that way everybody's on the same page, everyone's on the same dashboard. If you've already done that, you're listening to this going, well, I've got my visibility. I have my layer where I've put some BI, where I've put some analytics, on top of everything. I think one of the things we want to get into with that group is how valuable is it?
Mhm.
Like, what are you doing with it? And can you talk a little bit about the conversations you and I have been having just around like trying to use data that is flying everywhere all the time
Yeah.
across your business more effectively.
Yeah. And I just before I dive into the answer to that question,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a blend of what you said that's necessary. Yes, I think you need to commit at a organizational level to systematize as much as you can, but I do think having the leaders in place that are willing to be the change advocates and drive it is significantly helpful. I've seen organizations that have not really paid attention to and have just kind of gotten by, and then they bring in a leader who is more adamant about putting not just the right systems in place, but the right process and procedures, which I'll dive into in a minute as well.
Hmm.
And when you've got those advocates in the organization, it can't just be, I mean, oftentimes, and at least from my experience in lending, the CIO isn't the one that's going to do it. You do need the business side to push. Very different from most of my background being in mortgage tech, where I feel like the business and technology are really very lockstep. Comparatively. So I would say having good leaders in place that push does matter. But to your point, you still need it to be call it part of your DNA as well. And then to your real question here, I do think figuring out how to best leverage the technology. I think a lot of companies still don't even use the technology for what it was built for. So like,
Yeah.
let's start there. Why don't we use the technology for what it was purposed for? And then, look to expand the ability to gain better insights from there. But part of the issue with the data flying around is, you have people that are not properly trained or might not have the right procedure, or the right forms, loaded into Encompass to configure properly to get the data consistently in the right place, in the right order, et cetera. But then you have change that comes into play, right? So B is, okay, maybe we did it this way for 10 years and now all of a sudden leadership has shifted and they want to do it a different way. And now people that were collecting it one way have to shift to another. And the third is the edge cases. Like there's just so
Hmm.
many, like the more that I dig into it, there's so many edge cases where it's almost like you have to have an exception for about 5 million things. And it's not a sustainable scenario in my mind for lending side of the house. I really feel for them, not having been a lender myself. But having worked with lenders, like I do feel for what they have to deal with on a daily basis because things are constantly changing. It's like being blindfolded with a moving target. And I just think that that's hard to get your mind and your arms wrapped around. But you're not going to get anywhere if you don't at least start with what you talked about, which is get the right systems in place. And then again, wrap the right process, procedures, training to make sure people are actually getting the data where you need it so that you can then report and leverage it as you need it.
Yeah, I want to definitely highlight one of the things that you said, because I think you and I have been having this conversation. I'll go back to even like the MBA's Independent Mortgage Bankers Conference in New Orleans.
Yeah.
One of the things I heard from CEOs there was like, we're doing an audit. We're doing like a cost related audit. We're looking at this,
Yeah.
we're looking at this. And there was like a long checklist of things that they were auditing. But one
Mhm.
of the things that came up that I thought was made sense to me, and I didn't realize it was such an obstacle, and I've been obsessed with it ever since, like one of those moments when you hear about it and then you can't stop
Yeah.
thinking about it, was the overlapping redundancy of systems. To your point, you just said it. My system can actually do 17 different things, this one piece, and I have this other piece that does 4 of those 17 and 2 others. And then I
Yeah.
have a third piece that does some of what the first piece does, one of the things the second piece does, and a couple of other things. And that's largely how technology or partnerships have developed. And there's a bunch of reasons that we've talked about in other forums. In short, though, some people buy technology from their friends, some people buy technology for LOs, and all different regions need different things, and they do it for recruiting purposes, not for efficiency purposes. And then third, sometimes it's just the mindset of I have a problem, I need to solve it. And that's a very healthy mindset from a
Yeah.
business sales perspective, and a very frustrating mindset from a technology implementation perspective. But that's a lot of what we hear is I had a problem, I had to solve it. I had a problem, I
Mhm.
had to solve it. And all of a sudden, I have like 6 systems that are all this weird Venn diagram of overlapping capabilities. So like the first thing is check your systems and see what you're not taking advantage of if you're especially super cost focused and you haven't done that yet this year. I think that's one thing.
Yeah. No, tech stack evaluation is always something that should be evergreen. And I'll call out, having been mostly on the tech side. I think tech companies, I get you've got a business to run and you've got to be competitive, but also if we're going to be true partners in the ecosystem that is mortgage, we have to find ways to be better together for our customers. And the ones that resist finding a way to integrate, even through something as simple as an API, it really is frustrating because you watch the lender suffer as a result. And it's like, well, what's the point, right?
Mhm.
So I think the tech side needs to do better in that regard. But yeah, I mean, doing your tech stack evaluation as like a constant process, I think is necessary, because honestly, what I see people do is you're building the plane while you're flying at the same time. And you
Mhm.
don't really have a choice, to your point. Like, you're reactive to like, hey, I had something come up that was an issue, whether it was a audit issue, a cost issue, a complaint, doesn't matter. And so you go out and you find a piece of technology to help you fix it. Okay, fine, maybe you have to do it, you don't really have a choice, but in the process, then use that time to say, let me go back and look at this particular area and evaluate what I am leveraging. And maybe the quick fix is something that becomes part of that holistic strategy longer term. Or maybe it was something that was a stopgap. And yes, we made the decision to be reactive, but we had to stopgap, so we did it. And now we go back and reevaluate, does it make sense for the longer term strategy? And I think that second part, most lenders just struggle to find the time, the resources to put towards it, especially in this market where you're struggling to stay alive, keep your doors open. And I feel for them.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that it's really tough because that idea of working on the problem while it's in flight is potentially paralyzing. I mean, I
Yeah.
know just for myself, like I use the example of how frustrating homeownership is, despite that we're in the homeownership business. Like, your house is aging while you're trying to do stuff to it, and it's expensive. It's very expensive to decide
Yeah.
which thing to do in what order to
Yeah.
keep up with an aging house. Now, granted, I brought some of it on myself with a historic home in Detroit, Michigan, but that's different. That's not necessarily everybody's experience, but that's maybe a good comp for some of these companies. Like,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
some of these companies are a house that's been around for a while, and it
Yeah.
has, all kinds of different things aging at different rates and speeds. And it's one, like, it is easy to say, oh, well, you kind of map out your technology, get it on a board with your CIO or your CTO, and start to look at it and map it out. But I think doing that, like, in one session on a whiteboard, is very different than having what you said, like a literal change management process.
Hmm.
That is a muscle we don't flex a lot, I
Yeah.
think, in this industry, even at the highest levels. Even the lenders everybody looks to and says, oh, they're the digital lenders, they get technology. I
Right.
think change management, process improvement management is still, like, probably one of their biggest pain points and frustrations
Yeah.
at every level of this industry, would be my guess.
And I mean, the biggest companies, regardless of industry, know continuous improvement is necessary as a part of your culture, as a part of your DNA. Whether you think of it from agile technology to just general business process, like that, constantly looking at it going, let me question, is this still the right thing to do? Are we getting what we're expecting out of what we're doing? Is it the best course of action? Should we reconsider? Just constantly questioning what you have, not as a means to like go on a witch hunt or create more problem childs for yourself, but as a means to truly be continuously improving. And I think that's something that, could be another, to your point, muscle that we flex better in this industry.
So I think this is a great kind of last note on now as we
Yeah.
move forward to think about like next and later. And that
Yeah.
would be, I heard a CEO. I did a little work. I'll backtrack and then I'll bring it up to speed. So one of the first meetings, the new CEO of Quicken Loans, Jay Farner. I was there for the transition from Bill Emerson to Jay Farner. One of the first meetings he took as CEO was with FedEx,
Hmm.
and I kind of, to a degree, I was like, FedEx, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But that logistics of, we have to get a package from here to here,
Mhm.
and we have to get it through all of these different local municipality type issues. We got the last mile to contend with, but then we've got these regional centers. Anyway, it mapped very nicely to the mortgage industry in a lot of ways.
Oh.
And I think today it maps even more true, because at the time, Quicken Loans wasn't that focused on localized purchase. I mean, we're talking 8 years ago. So, and now everyone is focused on localized purchase
Yeah.
in addition to some of the more streamlined products and services. So, this idea that there are comps. And I went into like the manufacturing world where there's like raw materials and you have to produce a product and you have to sell that product
Mhm.
downstream. And I tried to, this was over the last like 6 months, and I tried to look at what does manufacturing know that we don't know? Or what could we do? Because a lot of people will say the lone manufacturing process, but not necessarily apply manufacturing principles to it. And so I
Sure.
was like, how would that work? I think some people do, but I think a lot of times we say it without doing it. And one of the things, I talked to a manufacturing CEO and he said, my question at a very simple level, every single time I get into the discussion you just mentioned, Sasha, was, do we know or are we guessing? Like, what do we know and what do we know or are we guessing? And I think if I was a CEO looking to transform my business to the next level in this market, and I'm not leaving the market, I want to stick around as a home finance company of the next generation. What do we know and what are we guessing? I think is a great, like, very baseline question for
Yeah.
data management in your organization.
Yeah.
And then try to evolve your map that you just described and how you make decisions along that map. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Well, yeah, and the data doesn't lie, right? So if you're capturing it and you're able to interpret it correctly, it doesn't lie.
That's
But
that's right.
to your point, if you don't know because you don't look at the data or you don't collect the data, then you are guessing. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of that is happening. And again, it's not okay, I love the quote, and I think it's Maya Angelou, but it might not be, so don't quote me on it. But like, when you know better, you do better, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's like no need to beat yourself up. There's a lot that I have come to appreciate about what it takes to be in the origination space. But you do have to, again, that lens of continuous improvement. So as you know better, do better. And if you find yourself guessing, then maybe that's an opportunity for you to say, we need more robust systems or processes in place to ensure that we're not guessing, that we truly are looking at the data and making more informed decisions. And I love the other thing that you said, which is people say it out loud, but don't do it. I hear so many lenders say, I want to be the Amazon of mortgage. Like I
Hmm.
want to be able to deliver a mortgage to your front door the way Amazon delivers a package. And I'm like, cool. When are you going to do it? Right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying it. And I love the idea of it, but like, how are you actually going back into your DNA and your culture and looking at the systemic issues that are causing you to not be able to do what you say you want to do, that are slowing you down, and not allowing you to be more with the times, and being held back by, again, this antiquated world that we still live in.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if I'm listening to this as a CEO or as a senior leader of a mortgage home finance organization, and I want to move from now to next, and I want to start to transform my business. Last week, we
Yeah.
said, be really honest about whether you're a referral based, retail operation, or whether you're a digital experience
Hmm.
company, or whether you're
Hmm.
trying to move from a referral company to a digital experience, and be honest about where you are and where you're trying to get to. Because if you keep saying you're a digital experience company and you're not, in other words, you don't care about the consumer experience. And when I say care, everyone cares.
Yeah.
When we get together at MBA, the top conversation is the consumer. But
Right.
when you look at spending, where did we put our resources? What did we buy? Who got to use it? Who was made more efficient by it? Did it work? It's typically not the customer. It's typically my team members, either my LOs, my production staff, my closers, whatever, my leaders.
Hmm.
And so the next category I was thinking of was, well, now I've got my data. I'm pulling it out of these systems. I've got my leaders working out of a consistent dashboard with consistent reporting, week, month over month, quarter over quarter, whatever. How do you find value in data that is typically considered a cost, right? So reporting data, HMDA data,
Hmm.
lending patterns data, title data, it's all kind of considered, I think, it's all kind of considered a cost. I got to do it. It's reporting. And then I'll go out on the other side of my business and buy like lending patterns data, or other types of market analysis data, when you may have some of that. Are you seeing anybody capitalizing? Are you seeing anybody think about data those that are using the holistic data lake approach, how do we get more out of the data we already have to collect and report anyway?
Yeah. I haven't seen anyone do it as a one-stop shop. I've seen people piecing it together. So
Got
to
it.
your point, right, you've got lenders inputting data at time of application, and that data helps them originate the loan, we'll say. You have to then go back and report on that data for HMDA requirements, right, at the end of the year. Then you've got these newer companies that are coming out saying, hey, I've got technology that can take the data you already have and help you think about, when is the right time to reach out for a refi, or when are they hitting a milestone in their life, either in, a marriage or family or the life of their home loan, et cetera, where it's at the right time to say, let me send you a message, or let me see if you're interested. And the opportunity to capture that continued business, right? I
Hmm.
haven't seen anyone yet, and doesn't mean they're not out there, really look at it holistically, either as a tech company or as a lender themselves. I think, again, it's this kind of like we're piecing it together little by little. And I think there's opportunity there. And I definitely think it's hard because you have to decide as a lender, like, where do I want to spend my resources? Do I want to buy? Do I want to build? And I've seen a lot of lenders build homegrown systems. And I think when you're larger and you have the infrastructure, that might work. But the smaller mid-sized ones, I think that's a lot to manage and maintain over time. And so you do end up finding the vendors that kind of piecemeal that whole end-to-end process together for you. And now you're layering technology on top of technology. And though it solves the problem, it could probably also be creating additional problems for you, both in cost and also just in managing data in disparate ways.
I really like that though, without knowing for sure. I suspect there's a lot of people who are going to watch this, listen to this, or in our industry who have purchased some CRM software in some way that is trying to manage that problem
Yep.
and are currently looking at an LOS, are currently looking at what's next and going like, is this still serving me?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if what we'll see is, because I think we could go two different directions with it. I talked to a couple of LOS providers over the past couple of months, and I think making LOS like more dynamic and more interactive with folks. So
Mhm.
getting multiple team members to be able to work on things simultaneously, having more collaborative tools the way Google has collaborative tools. I think a lot of focus is there from new, LOS providers. Vesta comes to mind as one I talk to a lot.
Yep.
Very collaborative, very dynamic, allowing work to happen in sort of the best possible ways because they're technologists, right? And I think the other thing that happened, I saw it happen as a trend on the servicing platform side, like the MSPs of the world,
Mhm.
which is make the source of truth as small as possible. Like you do what you got to do, it's your core system, but
Sure.
then put the other stuff on top of it that
Yeah.
you want to differentiate with or that you want to use that's different. And I'm curious if the other way the LOS will go is becoming really small
Mhm.
so that only that really core underwriting and reporting data is in there. And like on top of it becomes all these other layers of experience to
Mhm.
try to compete with a more dynamic, more digital process. So I think one key question you just highlighted that a lot of people could be asking themselves right now is like, what's the interaction of what I've purchased versus where I'm going? And how do I want to think about that? Should I buy more or should I just actually reduce the size and start layering on more components of CRM or more components of user experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love Mike at Vesta, and there are a lot of other, Wilco, I
Hmm.
think Loan Data Maps, or I'm trying to remember all the various newer LOSs that are out there trying to make their way. I, again, speaking out of turn because I've never sat in the origination seat, certainly not high enough up to make this kind of a decision, but man, somebody has got to take a chance on them because, as much as I came from Black Knight, so like I get it, Empower Dark Matter, I love you, right? Encompass, you've been the mainstay, but also I think it's healthy to have competition out there, and we need newer technologies, and we need someone that has the risk appetite to say yes and to give it a shot and see where it goes, and talk about the benchmark data that we would have in this industry to be able to compare and contrast and be able to think about how we truly do move people more towards the future of technology in this space.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think One of the questions that one CEO asked, which I think is a good benchmark question for a lot of people to think about, is why are my LOs still in my LOS? And I think that's a fair question. Probably not true everywhere, but if it's not true at your shop, then congratulations, you're ahead of at least the person that asked me this question. But I think that's a real thing. Is like, I don't think they should be. I think they should be, and then there's a laundry list of things: outselling, making relationships, doing all,
Sure.
building their team, blah blah blah. But I think that that's an example of, we're trying to provide tactical questions in the now next later conversation. That would be one of them. Like that's an insightful question. Where are you on the now next later roadmap for your data management, and who's responsible for what? But I also want to talk a little bit in the last few minutes here about sort of later, as
Yeah.
well. Why would you do all this stuff? Where are we going? And I think, you and I haven't talked a lot, and so I'd love your opinion on this, of like what you have to believe to be true
Mhm.
in order to make these decisions. And there's a real, at least to me, it sounds like there's really two camps forming. And I talk to people who say this business is fundamentally not changing. That the real estate agent's going to find a way to still be the most powerful force in the purchase transaction. The LO is still going to be a service provider to the realtor. Title's going to do what they're told by realtors and mortgage. Again, I don't know if any of that's true, but it feels to me like that's what's been true, especially on the purchase side.
Mhm.
And then that's one group of people that's going to be true. So I just need to continue to really fight at the almost at the street level to get these LOs to come and stay. And then
Mhm.
I think the other view is these functions, these jobs to be done within the mortgage experience are going to be slowly consumed by technology platforms, one by one. And the individual consumer is going to see more and more of the function in the system. And whether they're directed there by a real estate agent, whether they're directed there by an LO in the short term, in the long term, it'll be serving up to the customer all the things you need, all the things you need to do. And they're going through their checklist, and more of preparing yourself to find a home, to have a home, is digital. Would you say that's a fairly accurate description of kind of what's happening, what people have to decide, or would you add color or context? What would a CEO need to believe to be true, or how would they manage to some of these data questions? I'm gonna I'm gonna repurpose data this way, or I need to know more about my business before I make a decision. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about it?
Yeah. It's a loaded question. You went through a lot. I took some notes so I don't forget all of the, the things that
I
came
have a
up.
tendency to do that. I'll get better at that, I promise.
Yeah,
One
thank
question
you.
at a
Good,
time.
good thing I can handle overwhelming amounts of data all at once. Maybe you should hire me as your data management system. Just kidding.
Perfect.
So at a high level, one of the questions core to what you asked was, and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm incorrect here, but kind of, do we think that this industry is going towards an overhaul change, or is it just going to kind of continue to like pace along? And I think although you and I both would love to see the overhaul, the truth is I don't see that happening. I see it like it just continues to have layered change little by little. And maybe if we look back like a tapestry being woven, in 10, 15, 20 years, we'll be like, wow, a lot has changed, but I don't think it's going to feel like a big bang, right? It's not going to feel like, oh, overnight life changed. Even the people like Rocket who have reinvented that experience, I think are still working through the, does it actually work? And if it doesn't, how do I course correct? Right. So if that were going to revolutionize this industry quickly, I think it would have already happened, my personal opinion.
Hmm.
Um, from a CEO standpoint, thinking about what you want to ask yourself, what you want to be considering, for one, I would say that I like want to bifurcate into two different ways. So one's going to be more like basic high level process, and then one's going to be more to the automation piece that you spoke to. So we talked about this earlier, if you don't know what experience it is that you're trying to offer, if you don't know what your strategy is, what's setting you apart, what type of a business you're in and why you're in that business, the rest of it doesn't matter. So like
Hmm.
that seems like basics, but you'd be surprised how many people still struggle to have that be articulated, not only in a clear manner, but truly aligned with a mission and the resources that a bank, a credit union, and IMB can get behind. So I think understanding what that is first. And then when you think about process and technology, if the process is broken, technology is not going to fix it. So based on the experience you want to offer, unfortunately, you kind of have to go back and look at like, are the main high level processes we're following today as a financial institution actually helping us get to that experience? If they are, great, now let's explore technology. If they're not, then we got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what is systemically wrong that needs to be addressed. So kind of that like start with the end in mind. On the automated side, you think about a time when we used to go to an ATM for the first time ever and put a check into the ATM. And to you as a consumer sitting on the other side, Jeremy's like, cool, my check just got taken and there's like some cool computer on the other side, like processing. No, it was a human taking that check and processing it just like they did manually if you walked into the bank teller, right? So
Hmm.
it took time for that process to become more automated, right? So oftentimes we have to put like the cart before the horse a little bit and like be a little, again, avant-garde and throw some technology out there and start to automate and see how it goes. And then we mature as that process goes along. And so I think about, underwriting and processing and things where you are seeing a lot more automated AI type technology coming into play. And I think that's a place where you play with it and you see how it
Hmm.
goes and you continue to have humans make sure that what you expect the technology to do, it's doing, right? The trust and verify method. I also think what you said around consumers wanting to have the experience more in a automated fashion is true, right? I mean, you think
Hmm.
about the next generations coming up. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, they were born with an iPad in their lap. And so they don't know sometimes how to consume data any other way than electronic. And they're going to continue to push us to come up with solutions to make the home buying process easier and more automated. And I can do it from any uh, application, any physical piece of technology from anywhere in the world. And so I do think to an extent, because technology in other industries has moved forward so fast, that the consumers that are coming up to buy a home are going to be expecting that. It's going to push and drive us forward more to that end. Did I
Yeah,
hit on
when
all the topics? Did I miss
that
anything?
was perfect. No, I think you nailed it. Like that, my experience joining the industry was I just falsely made the assumption that
Yeah.
everybody understood that home buyers in particular would want a fully automated experience with the ability to change that whenever they want.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of like, I want what I want when I want it is a little bit of a power dynamic shift. I joined the industry and it was, we have the money, you are applying to get the money. So you're going to do what we say in order to get access to this big pot of money that we lend out. And it wasn't said that way. Of course, that would be terrible marketing and customer service. But guess what? The DNA of the industry was exactly that. What consumers expect now is you're lucky to have me. That's literally the feeling of a lot of consumers. You're lucky to have me. I know how valuable I am. I know how valuable my data is. So if I want to chat, I'm going to chat. If I want to call, I'm going to call. If I don't want to talk to anybody, I don't. And that idea to me was a no brainer. But I think to a lot of institutions, like to your point, how do you get from ATM to ATM that accepts checks to phone that takes checks and you don't even have to send the piece of paper in anymore? Like, how do you get there? And then beyond, fully digital. We're not going to have checks next year this time, I hope. But anyway,
Oh,
uh, so I think that's a great. So let's think about this move to later. Alan asked a question in the chat, so I'll throw it out there. Alan, I'm going to paraphrase, but if you are a referral lender and you want more of these digital channels and experiences, how do you do it? Because ultimately, your LOs may get the impression that you're not supporting them anymore, or they're going to realize, well, if this is now a digital lender, I'll just leave now type of idea. And we know somebody out there will tell them that. even if it's not 100% true, in order to get them to move. So when I think about moving an organization forward, but honoring the organization you've got, one of the things to me, Alan, that I think of all the time is, how do you use some of what we're talking about, either data or technology, to enable the LO to do more, right? The vast majority of successful tech, SaaS or not, has been to make experts more expert, has been to make professionals more professional, has been able to make those folks more efficient. And so if you think of your LOs as your experts, one of the things you want to do is give them more shots to close the deal more efficiently. So I would think of something, let me just throw an example out there. You have leads coming in from a digital source, whether that's like your marketing team, SEO, your website, whatever. How you enable your LOs to interact with those folks, I think, is critical. Do you have LOs who are, in a queue to access people who want to chat on demand? Do they have to wait to chat their particular LOS or their particular LO? So in other words, when a customer needs something, how are you managing the LO they worked with versus the LO who's available at that moment? And there are ways in which you can move your customer experience to be more digital. I can chat when I want, I can call when I want, I can connect when I want. That doesn't require your LOs to do business the same old way. And so I'm thinking of grabbing leads, how you distribute them, enabling a team of people to work on behalf of a customer who's shopping. If they're shopping, they don't have a home yet, they don't have an application yet. How do you think about like more structures that reduce the reliance on one, make the reliance on tools and people, but it makes the company faster, it makes the customer happier. And again, if you're doing your data right, you're getting better surveys, you're getting better scores. So I've used the example in the past of how F1 pit crews added more humans, but got faster. So it wasn't about removing humans the way we kind of always talk about it in financial services. Oh, we need less people to make it faster. There are scenarios, highly localized, highly physical scenarios where you added people and you still got faster. So I don't necessarily think that data management equals all technology all the time. I think that data's got to be used to say, where can I make my people faster? And then finally, I think this question of why are we doing this and for what reason? The one thing with the later category that goes right to Alan's question that we haven't been able to touch on yet is that this data is actually more valuable when it builds on itself. So whether you're talking about your CRM, the data that comes out of your LOS, POS, the data that exists and grows as you service a loan, a lot of times we're not leveraging that data holistically. And so we're not creating a profile for the home. We're not creating a profile for the customer that would allow our systems to treat them better and would allow them to do more. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is, how do we think about data as feeding a profile or feeding my system so that I can proactively serve up to the consumer opportunities? This doesn't just mean based on the time they've been in the home in Dallas, Texas, we might as well send them an email offer. And by the way, that email offer says $1,000 off closing costs, just like every other lender, just like every other email. But using data that has been informed from their home purchase experience or from their last transaction, that allows you to put some propensity data around it, a profile data around it. Hey, did you know homes in your area are typically inefficient around this energy source? Here's a way to save some money. Typically, homes in your area are getting solar panels that look like this, that cost this. Are you interested? Typically, homes in your area have improved 25% in value. Click here to see that value. And so, hey, Sasha,
I don't know what happened. Internet in South Dakota. Can't rely on it.
I didn't mention it because I was just rocking and rolling in case you didn't come back. But I wanted to end on this, which was the later stage where this all comes together, I was just describing, you have to have a consumer profile and a home profile. You have to feed those profiles with all of the data in your system so that you're actually customizing proactive data back to the homeowner. When you think of refi conversion, when you think of adding value and being a truly valuable home owner partner, the purchases should become refis, right? This retention should be, when I did the last transaction, I kept your profile up to date, I kept your home profile up to date, and now as I serve you back offers, these aren't, hey, remember us? Here's $1,000 to do it again. They are actually, I know your house, I know your neighborhood, here's what's happening. And by the way, if you do this, we think we can help you this way. And it often will take an LO to explain some of those offers or those things. You can feed that leads back to the people you're trying to keep happy. But even if you don't, you've kept the profile current with the data that you have, so that that house comes back in your system, whether or not it's a purchase or a refi, that person comes back into your system. You're able to retain, and then you're able to serve them better. It's proactive data pushed out to keep them connected. I don't think we're anywhere near that goal, but that's why you would do that now. You would do that now so that you can evolve your organization next to eventually get there, to be a true financial partner to someone.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that the internet cut. So you probably said about half the things I'm going to say, but to Alan's comment around the, LOs, needing to kind of come up to speed with the times, like you got to meet customers where they're at. And there's different ways to do that. And to your point, if you don't have the right culture, the right systems, and the right strategy for how you're going to get there later, and then help them have access to, how do I, as an LO, rethink what my job really is and how I approach it. And I mean, the best LOs I've seen truly are financial advisors to an extent, even though KP always jokes that he's not responsible for your losses, only your profits. Ultimately, I do think the LOs that are focused on really being a lifelong partner on a financial journey towards wealth building, which homes are still one of those, if not the top. And then also the different systems that are coming out, like FinLocker and Freeform and the financial literacy stuff Kristen's working on, right? Like there's so much out there where you're trying to really get the consumer to be not only more intelligent on their own, but with the support of you as their partner. So that's the only thing I would add to it.
Yeah, right on. I think that that's a great place to wrap. Like that's a great goal to think about. How are you using what's out there? How are you getting to the next step? We'll take a lot more feedback from questions. We're going to post this on LinkedIn, so hopefully people send you topics, and then we'll try to get that topic out for next week. Looking forward to it. Thanks for being here. It's exciting.
Thanks for me. Good chat.
All right. Same. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.